Welcome back to the Metal Exchange. Justin and Chris here with you for another week. It's Halloween, so we have something a little different and a little special for you. How are you, my friend?
Very good. Feeling spooky. This is, I think I had mentioned this a while ago, but when I was in college, I used to have a radio show, and every year on Halloween, I would try to do a Helloween-based episode, and I would just play pretty much just 2 hours of Halloween songs, just, the best, the rest, and the rare, to put it simply. But so I always like to celebrate Halloween with Halloween, and so this is a perfect way to do that. So thank you for choosing this.
Yeah, my pleasure. It will be different because unlike, our Halloween episodes in the past, we kind of get to talk a little bit about other bands and their interpretation of, some Halloween classics, and we'll, basically how this album came about. It's kind of interesting because when you look at the first one, this is entirely different. But before we go down that rabbit hole, anything that you heard this week that was interesting? I'll start. All of a sudden, a new Catatonia single. And I have to say, I remember hearing this. I sent it to you and I said, you know what? There's a chance you might like this new song, Atrium, because it was, by their standards, a little more upbeat and not as morose and dark and kind of plotting or whatever. I mean, I'm a fan of the band, so it was definitely a treat for me. But they also announced a new album, which is coming out in January 20th, to be exact, called Sky Void of Stars. What did you think of this Atrium single?
I liked it a lot. This is kind of the Catatonia style that I enjoy more than the kind of dreary, like kind of like low to mid tempo type songs that I don't even dislike those. I just find that these kind of more upbeat tracks, and I should state upbeat for Catatonia,
Yes.
are more in my wheelhouse. And this was one of those songs that I like just from the first listen. I was like, oh, this is good. I'll have to check out the rest of this album. I'm sure they'll have their usual morose songs, as you put it. But this is a band I've always liked. I've just never really loved. But I always, much like the Evergrays and Pain of Salvations of the world, I'll always keep my ears open for some good tunes, but they're never going to be my favorite band in the world. I'll just say that.
Totally understood. But I think if this song is any indication, the album could be quite tasty. What did you hear this week?
I kind of got back into, I was, as you know, with you. We should talk about that. Maybe at the end of the episode, we can talk about our couple of concert experiences from last week. But I got back and just tried to start digging back into some of the more recent releases. So I listened to the new Muse album, actually, Will of the People, and a highlight for me was the last song, We Are Fucking Fucked, which I thought was
right on point.
Yeah, I mean, it was like, these guys really hit the nail on the head, and it's a catchy tune too. So, cool album. I've always been a fan of Muse. I think that they're one of the better kind of alt rock bands that are still like out there making modern, current stuff. I'd mentioned to you that, and oddly enough, we had just posted today. We're recording on Saturday. We posted a track from Charlotte Wessel's new solo album, Tales from 6 Feet Under, Volume 2. For whatever reason, this hit me more than the Volume 1 that came out last year. I don't know if it was just the kind of mood I was in when I was listening to it, but I was really taken by it, and I enjoyed it a lot. And that the opening track, Venus Rising, which was the one that we shared today, I think is a real highlight, just a really cool tune that I've gone back to several times. But I just thought overall, the whole album was quite good. And then on your recommendation, I checked out Hex's new album, Pagans Rising, and that was really enjoyable too. Just like really good old fashioned, like crunchy kind of a melodic prog with a vocalist who kind of has that Nora vibe from Battle Beast, but a totally different kind of vibe band wise. I enjoyed that a lot. I do still have there's a few things still on my list to listen to, including the new Arena album, which has Damian Wilson on it, which I'm excited about. And I still haven't listened to the whole Avantasia release. I'm still holding on to still haven't listened to the new Avatarium album. And finally, this one kind of came out of left field because there were no singles for it released. But then the whole album just dropped on Friday. Royal Hunt's Dystopia Part 2, also something that I'm very interested in listening to, as I enjoyed the Part 1 quite a bit, and it seems like all of the same guests are returning for this. Former Royal Hunt vocalist Mark Bowles, and I always blank on the original singer's name, but he's a part of this too. And I think John West is the only old Royal Hunt vocalist who's not a part of this. But I believe the last time we mentioned him, we said he might not have been in great health. So I'm not sure. I don't know if that's true or not. But I would imagine he probably would have been invited. It would have been cool to hear the 4 major Royal Hunt vocalists all on one album. But yeah, that's kind of the to-do list, if you will.
Yeah, I have a long drive ahead of me today, and I'll be in the car for much of the day. So I'm actually going to curate probably like 6 or 8 albums, all of which I'll probably have a chance to listen to. So the Royal Hunt is on there. We have a group chat with a bunch of other guys, and somebody had mentioned a new Royal Hunt album, and I thought it was a mistake or a best of because I hadn't heard anything about this album. And then all of a sudden I saw that it comes out on Friday. So that is something I will definitely be listening to.
Yeah. The only reason I knew about it was because I think I'm on their mailing list. So I had just been getting these emails saying like there's a new album coming, but I didn't really know. I guess I pre-ordered it, but I forgot when the release date was. And like I said, there were no singles that were released ahead of it. So it's going to be a blind listen start to finish for me. I'll definitely give it a listen, hopefully before we record the next episode, and we can talk about it.
Yeah, I look forward to it. And you know what? I don't even want to wait till the end. We saw 2 awesome shows, I think, since the last time that we recorded. Different shows. Within Temptation, I actually felt bad for them opening for Iron Maiden because the place was so empty, and I think that Iron Maiden fans are just conditioned to coming in at 8:45, knowing that they're gonna, hear Doctor Doctor and then go on stage type of thing. But I thought they put on a very good show, and it was nice to see them, and it was cool to see them in such a big room. And then Iron Maiden just slayed. The fact that they're able to do what they do at this age is just nothing short of incredible. And I'm sure there's a lot helping the sound behind the scenes. I know, but from a visual standpoint and from just an energy standpoint, they are the best as far as I'm concerned. They never disappoint.
Yeah, I think a combination of the location of the arena and I can't imagine there were a lot of people tailgating because tailgating is technically not allowed at UBS Arena. There were a few people like on the very periphery of the parking lot, like as far away from the building as possible, up against like the chain link fence. But I mean, it wasn't very many. It wasn't like your typical kind of concert arena going experience where there's a whole parking lot full of people just, barbecuing and having beers and blasting the Trooper, which, we did hear on the way in. But so, yeah, I was a little perplexed as to why there were so few people there. I mean, I know we had a mutual friend who personally didn't even get into the building until Iron Maiden was just about to take the stage. So, like, it is Long Island / Queens. At 6:30 on a weeknight. So, I mean, I'm sure that had something to do with it. But like you said, there probably just wasn't a lot of crossover appeal for Iron Maiden fans who, like you said, are really there to see one thing. But as a Within Temptation fan, and what's funny is that like all 4 of us that were together were all happy to see Within Temptation. I thought they sounded great. I thought the selection of songs was great. They hit some pretty much something from like the whole gamut of their existence. played a bunch of the kind of the newer singles that I've released, but they were really good at it. And like you said, the only thing that kind of stunk was that there just wasn't that many people in the building yet. And I started to get worried that like it was going to be not a great showing for Iron Maiden. But by the time Doctor started playing, that building was absolutely jam-packed.
Jam-packed. And they have another, I think they had a show 2 nights later in New Jersey, which is essentially the same market, the New York City market. It is nothing short of spectacular. I mentioned it last week. They are doing their next tour, which I think starts in Europe, but it's going to run through 2024. I will grab my tickets to see this Somewhere in Time, and then other, I think, selected tracks from the new album. I can't get enough of them. I just think that they're so entertaining, and it's like every 3 or 4 years when I get to see them, it's like it's time to go see Iron Maiden again, and it's just as good as the last.
What were your
one.
feelings as somebody who's seen them a handful of times? What was your feelings of the set list this time around and the song selection?
It was a little interesting. They started with the 3 new songs, which is kind of an interesting way to start a show and not really sprinkling them in throughout. And I happen to think that those are 3 of the better songs on the album. So I had no problem with them playing them. But once they finished that like 20-minute montage of new material, it was right into Revelations and the old stuff. And that's when I obviously, as a longtime fan, I lost my mind. It was an interesting set list. I think I said it on the way out, and I stand by this. They can play an entire show of songs. You can enjoy it and say this was a great concert. And then you could say, I would have created a set list with entirely different material and said that was even a better set list than I just saw, because they have so much stuff that you want to hear. I mean, I think just think about the songs that they didn't play, right? Like they didn't play Infinite Dreams. They didn't play 2 Minutes to Midnight. And I'm just going through the hits, right? They didn't play Wasted Years.
They didn't play Bring Your Daughter to the Slaughter.
I mean, they didn't play Tail Gunner.
Not that a lot of people were complaining.
But it's just when you think about like what they didn't play, you'd say that's a greatest hit set with just that stuff. And then, of course, the deeper cuts, as a fan of songs like Infinite Dreams or stuff like that, I just wish I could hear all this stuff. But I can't complain. I got my money's worth. I thought it was a great show.
That's how I feel anytime I see Helloween, who we're going to obviously talk about. But it's like, I'm like thrilled to see them, but at the same time, I'm like, man, there's like 25 songs that I would have rather have heard because I'm just such a fan of every song. And that's what happens when you become a diehard fan of a band, is that like it gets harder to see them play live and play a more like set that's aimed towards casual fans, which is why I've remained a fan of Pearl Jam, in that you never know what you're going to get from them. Whereas like Green Day, another band I'm a big fan of, they've kind of gone the route of play the hits. And even though they can cram in like 30 songs into a set, there's so many other songs that I would love to hear live that they just don't seem to touch. So I totally get it. And I have a feeling I'm going to feel the same way after we leave the Helloween show next year. There's just too much of a catalog to like really satisfy everybody's, desires for hearing stuff. So
too much of a catalog and only 2.5 hours or so to play, to play a particular set. But a couple of nights later, we would go see Epica and Sabaton after enjoying a few adult beverages and some good company before the show. I got to be honest. What was that?
And Pat was there.
Right. Some good company, and Pat was there. It was definitely definitely a different experience. I couldn't believe that they were playing the Hammerstein Ballroom, which for those that don't know, I mean, the place holds, I think, close to 4,000 people or something like that. And the place was packed. I mean,
I think I had heard that it was sold out.
I believe it. I don't know what the next step for these bands are. I'll say this. Epica always puts on a good show. I didn't think it was anything remarkable from them. I thought it was just another solid Epica show. The set list I thought was kind of all over the place, but it was good. And then Sabaton, I haven't seen them in quite some time. They were good. I just think that they're not my favorites anymore. I'm kind of a little bit over the shtick, but we stayed for the majority of that set before I said I got to get out of here. I've got work in the morning. But what were your thoughts? Did you enjoy that? I mean, I'll be honest. I thought Iron Maiden was a better show than Sabaton and Epica.
Yeah, I mean, I was on the tail end of a long trip, seeing Maiden and going to see an Islanders game and going to a Broadway show, spending a bunch of days in New York City. So like, I think I just reached the end of my, I think my exact words were I ran out of fucks to give at that point, and it was just kind of like, it was there and I liked it and it was enjoyable, but I just couldn't get like sucked into it and really like, because I think I was just like burned out on just everything, all the traveling and all the stuff. There's only so much you can kind of get excited for. And also, like, I don't know, those kind of venues, I don't love them because it's like standing room only. We're all the way in the back. It doesn't sound as good. Like, Maiden's sound was unreal. Like, that just blew my socks off. So, like, having that as a recent comparison, I've never been a big fan of most of the New York City venues because they're like long and not wide. And so, like, if you're like me and you don't want to be in the sea of humanity because you'd rather not have a panic episode in the middle of Manhattan, you try to stay on the edges. And by the way, like, we got there, 15 minutes before Evigo went on, and there was a line around the corner. They just started playing as we were walking in. So yeah, like, I mean, it was fine. I just remember enjoying both bands a lot more the last time I saw them, and I think that isn't a knock on the bands. It's just the circumstance, surrounding the situation. But all in all, it was a very enjoyable trip, and there's nothing better than going to New York City to make you feel so much more calm when you're not in New York City.
I say that every day of my life, but alas, here we are. Let's talk some Helloween before we get into a very, very heavy news section. There's just a lot that happened this week. This album, The Keepers of Jericho Part 2, is a tribute album that came out in 2002. And it's got 13 tracks, very, very interesting bands that were chosen because at the time that these bands were kind of on this album, I don't think anybody knew the vast majority of these bands, save one or two, which was ironic because just 2 years prior, there had been another tribute album, The Keepers of Jericho, or The Keepers of Jericho Part 1, if you will. And that album, I specifically didn't choose because we've discussed many of those bands in long form. The covers on that album include Rhapsody, Sonata Arctica, Heaven's Gate, Metallium, Luca Turilli, Vision Divine, Labyrinth, Secret Sphere, Brainstorm, amongst others. It is just one superstar power metal band from that era after the other. And so I have to think it was a successful release because they come out with this second one with a bunch of essentially no-name bands. Again, save for one or two. I don't even remember how I heard about these albums when they came out. I remember the first one because when I saw the lineup, I'm like, I have to have it. And then I enjoyed it so much that I just bought this as a matter of course when I was in college. Yeah,
I would venture to say that my experience was similar. I do remember I think I was webmaster of the Future World Helloween site at the time. So, I would do my best to try to post, any sort of timely news. And I remember when this was announced, I was like, holy crap, like this is, I don't think I've ever seen a tribute album where there were so many heavy hitters as far as bands go. I think Morafade and Squealer and Sidonia were the three bands on that first volume that I hadn't heard of. And everybody else were all like, pretty much A or B list power metal bands. A Dark Moor, I think, was the only one we didn't mention. They did an amazing cover of Helloween, which is no easy task. But yeah, I thought it was interesting that you chose Part 2, just because I find that it's a little bit more interesting just because you get to hear a lot of these bands that you probably weren't familiar. Even now, like I look at this list and it's like, Axon Star, Dragonland, Iron Savior, maybe
Right, right.
are the ones that I'm familiar with, and maybe, I mean, I'm trying to remember if I know Celesti because they were on this album, and I know Fraternia is, I believe they're a U.S. band, that we have a mutual friend, Different Pat, who's a big fan, which I thought was really interesting. But yeah, the rest of the bands, I'm like, Red Wine, High Lord, Paragon,
And to be clear,
Power God.
Fraternia is a Swedish band. So unless there's an American band, but we'll get into all of this. But yeah, it's a who's who of who are these bands, right? Like it's a who's who, like who. It's kind of crazy, but obviously I had to have it. And I remember back in 2002, 2003, I played the shit out of this album. Like I used to play this album constantly, and then I just kind of didn't for a while, and I really, really liked it. I was curious to see how it was going to hold up, especially for me as I've become somewhat disenchanted with power metal. I was wondering if this would hold up for me the way that it did, close to 20 years ago.
I will say there are some versions on here that I think are out of this world, and I'll definitely be pointing them out as we get to them. But there are a handful. I don't even think I have a song of the week in my head just yet. I'm sure I'll figure it out. But also, and I mentioned this last week in short, the Keepers of Jericho Part 1 was called Keepers of Jericho because it focused on only songs that came from the Keepers of the Seven Keys and the Walls of Jericho / mini LP, just pretty much those first 3 or 4 formative years of Helloween, whereas this one actually features a song from Pink Bubbles Go Ape and a song from Master of the Rings and a song from Time of the Oath. So I guess the bands were allowed to kind of reach out, or they probably ran out of songs too. I mean, there's only so many songs on those first 3 albums, and they hit like a lot of the obvious choices on that first one. I Want Out, I'm Alive, Eagle Fly Free, Future World, Halloween, How Many Tears. So on this one, I think the song selection is a little deeper, which I think was a nice follow up to that first one.
Yeah, I think that's well said, and it's kind of interesting why or how certain bands wound up with certain songs, because in certain cases I think it's a perfect fit, and in others I scratch my head a little bit. We'll kick it off with the first track, which is Iron Savior, going back to the Walls of Jericho, playing Phantoms of Death. And this is fascinating for a number of reasons. First of all, Iron Savior, the German power metal band, had been around since 1997. So they were new, but they were by far the most famous band on this entire compilation for a couple of reasons. Number one, I think you'll recall Kai Hansen was a guest on that first Iron Savior album. So he had a lot to do with it. I think he helped write the songs. That in and of itself is fascinating. But what's even more interesting is that, and I didn't know this, but the main guy behind Iron Savior, Pete Slick, he helped write a lot of the songs on that original Helloween EP, even though he was never credited with the songwriting. So I have to think, and I could be wrong about this, but this might have been one of the songs that he actually wrote for the band when he was in the band for a spell back in the mid 80s, which is just absolutely phenomenal or fantastic. I'm looking at the track listing, and it turns out this was not one of those songs. I think he had credits for, or I should say, is attributed to like Starlight and Warrior and Victim of Fate, which I know was a Wiki track. But they come out and they do just a phenomenal job setting the tone for this album, in my opinion. I think it's one of the best covers on the album.
I agree, and I also think that it gives the song a little bit more polish. We talked about Walls of Jericho. It was our second episode, actually. Yeah. And it's not the most well-produced, album in, retrospect when you go back and listen to it. And so hearing some of these songs, and we'll get to Murderer too, which is really, I thought, a really cool cover. Hearing those songs modernized, I think really gave them a new breath of fresh air. And this is one of them. And actually, to even go back even further, Pete and Kai Hansen started like the beginnings of what would become Helloween in 1978, when they formed the band Gentry. So like Pete and Kai were working together even that far back, and I'm pretty sure that Kai was actually a full-fledged member of Iron Savior when they first started, and then I guess with Gamma Ray taking off, he just didn't really have the time for it, and he's since not been involved. But I think he's actually the vocalist on at least the first album, maybe beyond that. So that, yeah, there is definitely a connection to this song. So I imagine there was a reason why they chose this one as the song they were going to cover. The vocals are really cool too. Like just this, very different from Kai's original vocals.
They are. And I'll say this, I've no disrespect to the band. I mean, they're still around and they're still writing new music. They had a new album, Skycrest, that came out in 2020. I've never gotten into this band, and I feel like it's something I should like, but I don't know. I think I've listened to every album at least once, but nothing ever said this is like must listen to stuff. So I kind of just passed on them, but I recognize that this particular cover was just really well done, and it was kind of a standout track on the album for me. And I also got to give them credit for not doing a hit. They did, one of the deeper cuts. I mean, nobody talks about Phantoms of Death. Great job, great cover, well polished, to your point, and just a good way to kick off the album.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and like I was saying, the vocals I thought were just kind of like this like gravelly kind of like just cool kind of sound. Like I just thought it was a really cool just version. And Thomas Knack, formerly of Gamma Ray, I believe, was it Gamma Ray or Blind Guardian? He was the drummer on this. Like it was Gamma Ray, yeah.
Yeah, it's really good, just well done. And then you move away from Iron Savior, and now you get into this like run of kind of bands that were lesser known. The second track is a cover of Dr. Steen by Steel Attack, a Swedish band. They had only formed in 1997. I think at the time that this cover came out, they had only had 2 albums under their belt, and they would kind of disband by 2008. I think I had listened to some of their stuff, but I was never a fan of theirs. I'm curious to know what you think, or I'm curious to know what you think about this particular cover of Dr. Steen.
I thought it was kind of like basically in the vein of the original song. I feel like they didn't really try to do anything different. Different kind of like vocals. You can really hear the Swedish accent in the singing. Excuse me. I thought it was a solid cover. It's not one of my favorite covers on this album. It just was fine, but I also think that Dr. Steen is kind of like maybe one of the most overplayed Helloween songs at this point. So I will say Freedom Call did a cover of it that I enjoy a little bit more than this.
Yeah, for me, I thought it was a little bit generic, and I don't particularly love the vocals. I think that this particular cover lacks kind of the goofiness that the original song had, and to me, that was what made the song so charming when I first heard it by Helloween. I could take or leave this one. I don't think it needs to be on here, but I don't think it's terrible. I just don't think it's particularly noteworthy.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
And then we get to track 3, which is a band called Power God. Now, this is interesting because I don't think I knew a note by these guys. They're another German band. They come out in 1999, again, as many of these bands did, but by 2005, they would hang it up. And I'm not really familiar with these guys. But the singer, Power God singer, was definitely channeling his inner Kai Hansen, at least in my opinion, on this particular cover. It is a real awesome cover of Starlight, a real headbanger. And the way I would describe it is kind of odd. I would say that this particular cover is better than it has any right to be, because the band itself is kind of but the cover is pretty freaking good. I I think I might want to check them out after 20 years. I think it's about time. I'm kind of curious to see what kind of material they were putting out.
Yeah, I mean, we're not off to a good start as far as bands thriving after this album was released. We're 1 for 3 so far. But yeah, again, like kind of harkening back to what I said before about hearing these Walls of Jericho era songs done in a modern, and as far as modern, 20 years ago would be, I just think that it's definitely a way more modern, at least a more modern production. And yeah, I agree with you. I think this was a very well done and very interesting take on it. I think the vocals kind of sound different enough that gives it its own kind of flavor. But yeah, I thought this was quite good.
Were you familiar with Celesty? Because now we get to them. It's track 4, and they cover The Chance. Celesty, for those that don't know, they were a Finnish band. 1998 they start. They come out with 4 albums in the 2000s, and they also, to keep the track record alive, they were done by 2009. This was a band I was familiar with, and their album Legacy of Hate, which came out in 2004, very good power metal for the time. I was a fan of these guys, and I was sad when they kind of broke up because I thought they had potential. What do you think of the cover of The Chance, which is track 4?
I love this. First of all, I think this is one of the most underrated Helloween songs ever. So shout out to Mr. Roland Grappo, one-time guest of the Metal Exchange. I always talk about how underrated I think him and Uli's songwriting for Helloween were and how important they were, even though it was looking back at this almost 40-year history of the band, it's almost at this point like they were in the band for a cup of coffee. But I thought that their songwriting helped add more depth to all those albums that came out. Roland on Pink Bubbles and Chameleon, and then both of them with Master of the Rings, Time of the Oath, Better Than Raw, and The Dark Ride, which I think of like name a band that had a better 4 albums in a row. That was a hell of like 4 just heavy hitters in a row. And so this was one of the songs that Roland wrote for the Pink Bubbles Go Ape album, and Roland kind of had the unenviable task of replacing Kai Hansen after Kai Hansen decided that he didn't want to do the slog of touring, which in retrospect is kind of laughable considering everything he's done since then. But this was like, I think Roland got like what the Helloween sound was supposed to be, but yet made it his, added his own songwriting spin to it. So I love that somebody was like, let's cover this song. And I don't know about you. I think of the High Live album, because I think that was the first time I ever heard The Chance. And it was with Andy singing, and I was like, this is cool. I was bummed that it went out of rotation when I think even before Roland had left the band. It was such a nod to like these 2 albums that were very underloved and underappreciated in my opinion. But this is a really cool, just fun, awesome cover. And this was, I think, the first I had heard of the band. I think this might have been like the first song that was released by them outside of demos. Like this album might have come out before their debut album, Reign of Elements, that came out in 2002.
I am going to make this my song of the week. I love this cover. I want to speak about it, but I want to give it a listen first. So here's Celesty's cover of The Chance. as I mentioned, I would go on to become a pretty big fan of this band. I think that this cover is very similar to the original, but a tick faster, which I thought was kind of an interesting touch. I just think the tempo is a little bit faster. And the singer has got some set of pipes on this guy. Kimo Paramaki, I'm sure I am not saying that properly, as the band is a Finnish band, and I just, I'm a little down on my Finnish, but this singer's got some set of pipes and does this song such a good justice. Selfishly, I want to hear this again this week, so I thought, what better choice than this for a track of the week? Great cover, great selection, fit the band well, put their own little spin on it. Job well done.
Well said. Yeah, this is one of my favorite tracks on the album. I'll choose something else for song of the week, but this is probably in my top 3 or 4.
Yeah, I'm with you. The next cover is, we go back to the Keepers albums with a tale that wasn't right. And it's Beto Vasquez Infinity. And for those that don't know, this band is still around and kicking, and they've kind of blended the power metal and the symphonic metal genres, and they've done a pretty nice job over the years. They came out around the turn of the century. Their self-titled debut had come out about a year prior to this cover, and they're still around and doing it. Their last album came out last year. It was called Mental Asylum. They're out of Argentina. And they just, every 2 or 3 years, you can kind of expect an album from them, with some gaps in between. But for the most part, they're very, very active. However, that being said, and to be honest, I am a fan of this band. There's certain albums that they've come out with which I thought were pretty spectacular. Flying Towards the New Horizon, for example, in 2006, very solid album. However, I am not a fan of this cover. I think it's ambitious to cover a song like A Tale That Wasn't Right to begin with. And I just don't think that this particular song fits them so well. There's certain sections where the vocals are kind of layered. I found that to be very, very distracting. I think it lacks the emotion of the original. And no offense, but the vocals just don't hold a candle to Kisk's vocals on the original. It was almost like they mailed this one in, and I'm just not a fan of it.
I have a few thoughts. First of all, I do not know one song by the Beto Vasquez Infinity.
And they've been around forever too.
I know, it's so funny. But I actually disagree quite a bit about your feelings on this song. First of all, guest vocals by Elisa Martin, who also did the vocals on the Dark Moor cover of How Many Tears, or I'm sorry, Helloween on the part 1. I love her vocals. I think that there's something so unique about it, and I believe she actually has her first solo album coming out soon, if not out already, and I'm a big fan.
I like her vocals too. I just think that I didn't like this particular cover, and to be honest, I think her voice has matured over the last 2 decades. Where I happen to enjoy her vocals, I don't like them on this track. To be clear.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I definitely think she has a different sound nowadays, but I don't know. I like everything that she's done. I think this is good. Of course, like, nothing's going to hold a candle to the original, but I think they did a pretty solid job. I'm not going to say it's not one of my favorite tracks on the album, but I thought it was good. I mean, it feels like, being that she's, a woman, I think it's less she doesn't have to like strain herself as much to hit those high notes the way Kisk really was, like, you could tell he was really pushing himself. And I think that added kind of a layer of emotion to it, whereas it felt like she didn't have to like try as hard. So maybe that comes off as like going through the motions or mailing it in. But it's fine. I agree with you to a certain extent. I just think that I thought the vocal performance was fine, but I just think the cover overall was just kind of pedestrian.
So same result, but for different reasons. Paragon is another band that quite frankly, I didn't know anything about. What's interesting here, though, is all these bands are coming out around 1999, 2000. Paragon had been out and releasing full length albums for years. They formed in 1993, and by 1995 they were releasing full length material. They are a German band, and they are obviously intimately familiar with a lot of this Helloween stuff because they too were from Hamburg, much like Helloween. They decided to cover Metal Invaders, which is another kind of, I don't know, less popular track, I guess, off of Walls of Jericho. What are your thoughts on how they did their Walls of Jericho cover?
This isn't really one of my favorite Helloween songs to begin with, so I didn't really have like super high expectations, quite honestly, and it's fine. I think it's again, like it sonically it sounds way like much better than the production on Walls of Jericho. The vocals are just fine. It's a serviceable cover. It's not blowing my doors off, but it's good.
I love it. I actually think they did a really good job for a song, to your point. Not my favorite Helloween song, but I thought they did a really nice job on a really pedestrian song to begin with. The bass really pops on this one, and I thought that between that, the underrated vocals, and the great guitar work, I thought they did a very nice job. I don't know if it would have been my choice of songs to cover, but I thought they did a good job with what they were working with. One of the better covers, in my opinion. But like I said, different strokes for different folks. The band is still around. They released an album in 2019. I think that was like their 12th or 13th full length album. So they're churning out material left and right. But I can't say that I'm intimately familiar with any of their back catalog.
Yeah, same.
Which moves us to a band that I am pretty familiar with because they only have 3 albums. Their first was in 2002, Memories of a Dream. They would come out with 2 more albums, one in 2004, take a nice long hiatus and come out with another album in 2018. And that's Arwen, which is a band from Spain. I always thought that this band had the potential to be bigger than they were, but they just never really kind of took off. But they're a very interesting band, and on this particular album, they cover March of Time, which is another difficult selection to kind of choose from that Keepers era. But I think they do a nice job. A lot more keyboards than we hear on the Helloween album, which was very prominent in this cover. And I think that, like, because of that shining with and the keyboards being even more prominent than the guitars in many ways, I thought it was a nice little twist. But it's a difficult song, and they did a nice job with it. And I thought it was one of the better covers on the disc.
Yeah, this is one of my top 3 songs on this album. It's not going to be my song of the week, but it's close. This, along with the next track, are round out my top 3 on the album. I do have a winner, and we'll get to that. But I thought this was a really well done track, to the point where it actually made me interested to hear more. And so this was one of the bands I actually went and got some of their albums and tried to get more into their stuff. But then they went 14 years between albums, between their second and third album. So, I guess Dragonland's not the only one that likes to take long breaks between albums, but I thought this was really well done. And like you said, this is an ambitious choice. I think this, along with Twilight of the Gods, are 2 of the faster, Keeper era Helloween tunes. And I think this was really, really well done. I love, like you said, they right from the get-go, you're hearing keyboard parts that weren't on the original song, which I think add a nice flavor. And instead of just doing a repeat of the original song, it gives it its own kind of personality. So this is definitely something that I would recommend if you're only going to listen to a handful of tracks from this album. This is definitely within my my top 3. And then I'll have the Chance rounding out and those are my top 4. and I'll mention the other two as we move along.
I like it. The next track was a band we mentioned previously, Fraternia, out of Sweden. They put out their first full-length album in 2000 to really high praise. And then in 2002, they would come back with A Nightmare Story, their second album, which also got like increasingly high praise from the power metal community. And then they went dormant, much like some of the other bands on this. But they came back in 2019 with an album called The Gathering, and they're coming out with another album this year in November called The Final Stand, which I'm actually kind of curious to hear because their last album was really good. Fraternia, kind of forgotten to time, but now back covering Murderer. I'll just kind of give you my thoughts. I don't love the vocals. I think that they're not my favorite part, but there's a grittiness to the way they do this cover, which is phenomenal. And I actually think it's overall a very good cover. And I think their material is better than this cover, but it's intriguing because this cover is unique as opposed to some of the other covers on this, because it just almost has like this thrashier element to it, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, they decided to beat out Arwen for longest break in between full length albums with a whopping 17 years between A Nightmare Story and The Gathering. I did not know they were coming out with a new album, though. I would love to hear that. I'll have to add that to the ever growing list of things that I need to listen to before we have to make a list for the year. I always really liked this cover. I like that it starts out again with like keyboard parts that were not in the original song, kind of giving it more of a modern power metal kind of flavor. I always thought this was a very underrated Helloween song. It's the second track from the mini LP or just the Helloween LP as it was called. Very early Kai Hansen written tune, but I thought they did a hell of a job. I always really enjoyed this cover. So this will be in my top 4.
What are your thoughts on Valdemar's cover of Gorgar? I don't think I knew of this band at the time. I certainly didn't. What's ironic is that this particular cover didn't get me to go out and check out the band. Very interesting song choice, right? Gorgar is kind of one of those hidden gems, I guess, on Walls of Jericho. A very interesting selection. They would come out with a bunch of albums in the 2000s with breaks in between, but they actually are still are alive and well. Valdemar, Straight to Hell came out in 2020. I'd be lying if I said I heard it. What are your thoughts on the cover? To me, it's kind of pedestrian. It's just like on there, not bad, just unremarkable.
This is my favorite song of all time about a pinball machine.
Yeah, well, you better than the Who.
Well, that song's about a pinball wizard, not a pinball machine. Whereas this song is actually about the machine itself, which
I can't argue with that logic.
It's kind of funny that this is the band many years later would write another song called "The Game Is On," which has sound samples from Tetris for the original Game Boy. I never really cared much for this song, to be honest with you. I thought it was kind of very like it's I think one of the least memorable songs from the Walls of Jericho era. So it's a fine cover. Like there's like a little bit of a Hall of the Mountain King riff. It's fine. Like it's not nothing against Valdemar or the band of which we will not speak.
That's Voldemort.
It's just like it's just a song nobody ever asked to hear covered, and they decided to cover it anyway. I mean, again, I'll circle back to our talk about Iron Maiden and selecting songs for set lists. It's like, there's a total of 26 Helloween songs on these 2 tribute albums, and like they could have picked anything else, and they went with I think I've dropped the F-bomb enough for this episode. They went with F and Gorgar. So yeah, it's fine, whatever. Moving along.
The good news, in my opinion, is that we actually finish up this album very strong. So as I agree 100%. Dragonland, who I won't go into much detail on because we just did them in long form last week or 2 weeks ago. They choose Soul Survivor, which is a phenomenal song to begin with. This is an outstanding cover, and I could have easily made it my song of the week, but I wanted to go with something different because we just did Dragonland. But I gotta be honest, and this is like kind of interesting. The drummer on this Dragonland album, or I should say this Dragonland cover, is somebody we know because we just spoke to him. Jonas Heigart does the vocals and the drumming on this particular track, and it's amazing. His drumming is so good. It's a standout part of the track. It is tight. It is crisp. I would argue that they are the best band on this album by a country mile. Like it's not even close how much better they are than everybody else.
Well, they're also the only band we've ever done a full episode on from this album. So
yeah, but I mean, there's other, like, we're gonna get to Accent Star in a second. They're grossly underrated, and they're actually a band I think we should cover. But like, Dragonland is just so good. This is so upbeat and so much faster than the original. I think it's a phenomenal choice.
Yeah, I agree. And cheers to not like going the route of choosing something from the Keeper or the Walls of Jericho era. I kind of wish they would make like a volume 3 or a part 3 where they focused more on the 90s era of Helloween and maybe even the Dark Ride as well. There's just so many great tunes in that era, and this being one of them. This song kind of is almost like a point in time where Helloween, it's the first song on Master of the Rings. It was kind of like Helloween's big comeback after, Kisk was dismissed and Ingo was dismissed, and the band was just like, all right, it's time to kind of get back to our metal roots, and we went a little like off the wall on the last 2 albums, although I'll argue to the death that some of the best Helloween songs of all time are on those 2 albums. That being said, they, especially Chameleon, lacked that metal punch, and they brought in Andy Darris and Uli Kush, and they, I think, brought the band back to prominence again. And so I always hear, this is the first song you hear on Master of the Rings, so it's kind of like the ushering in of the Andy Darris era, or even the Roland Uli Andy era, which only lasted 6 years.
It kind of reminds me of like Nova era by Angra, which was kind of them ushering in the post-Matos era of Angra. That always had a similar feel to me as Soul Survivor did on Master of the Rings. 2 phenomenal tracks by anyone at any time. So I'm with you. A time of transition, obviously a great cover. And like I said, could easily be Song of the Week, but I needed to go in a different direction just because we covered them a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, well, absolutely fair. Speaking of Song of the Week, here's mine. Twilight of the Gods by Accent Star. Boy, this made me get up off my ass and go get every Accent Star album before and since. And I have since become like a huge fan of this band. I think that the vocals, and I will say his name correctly, Magnus Eriksson is the vocalist. He has such a unique style. It almost sounds like it's like made from a computer. Like it's, I don't know if he's using like reverb or whatever, but like he just has such a cool voice. And this is one of the like all-time best Helloween songs, one of their fastest, just balls to the wall, and they just kill it, much the same way that Arwen did with March of Time. This was a home run, easily my favorite cover on the, maybe not easily, but it is my favorite cover on the album. Let's give it a listen, and then you can chime in with your thoughts.
have to say that was a great choice. I have a soft spot in my heart for this band. A, because I like them. B, because in my opinion, they've always been grossly underrated and they should have been bigger than they were. And for some reason, they just never took off. But the reason I laugh is I have a buddy of mine who will send me texts every day with check out this, check this out, check this out. And he'll even send me stuff that he knows he will hate, but he thinks I'm going to like. And this is my buddy Frank. And what he said to me is every time there's a power metal album, he always compares them to Axenstar, which is the funniest thing because like not every band sounds like Axenstar, but like even though he doesn't even listen to power metal anymore, if there's a band out there that he thinks sounds like Axenstar, he wants it because it reminds him of the way they were in 2002. It's just really funny. So this band always triggers my buddy Frank. Phenomenal cover. Great choice. They should have been bigger. And I guess that's the one, not regret that I have, but they're still putting out albums that nobody is talking about. So I think we have to change that and do an Axenstar album.
I grab whenever they have a new album. I pre-order it. Whatever. Like I'm always excited, and it always is an enjoyable listen. And it's been 3 years, but it was 5 years in between their last two albums. So hopefully in the near future we will get another Axenstar album. They actually have 7 full-length albums now.
Yeah, it's incredible. But they're still alive and kicking, as is Italy's High Lord, who comes in with Power, another Time of the Oath era track that they've decided to cover. A band that came out right around the time of this disc, around the turn of the century, and they're still putting out albums. I think they have another album. It's called Freaking Out of Hell, which comes out in December. So they're just continuing to churn out stuff every couple of years. I don't love this particular cover, at least for me. I thought that the sound, like the production, was just a little flat. And they're a good band. I actually like some of their original material. But for some reason, this cover doesn't grab me a ton. The backing vocals are kind of cool during the chorus. I thought that was a nice touch. The solos are good, albeit different than what you hear on the actual Helloween album. I just prefer their original material to this cover.
Funny thing, I never heard a High Lord song besides Power for forever. And I want to say it was Adam, but I could be wrong. But I just know somebody, I think it was Adam, posted in our Facebook group a song from High Lord from 2001, which would have been the year before this Keepers of Jericho Part 2. The song was called All I Want. It's one of my favorite songs I heard in 2022.
Albeit 21 years later. And the funny thing is, obviously he had no idea we would be talking about High Lord on an episode months later. And honestly, as much as I like that, I remember listening to the song again and liking it. It just so happens that they happen to do the cover on the album. But it goes to my point. I thought that their original material is probably better than this particular cover for some reason.
It has like that, and their original, at least the one song I heard, it has that early, like late 90s, early 2000s Italian power metal vibe, which I think it's kind of like you gotta love it or hate it, and like people like me and Pat, we love it. So I was like, how am I hearing this song for the first time 21 years later? But I mean, no joke, it made it onto one of my playlists, and it's one of my favorite songs that I heard in 2022, in spite of being over 20 years old. I guess I should probably mention the cover while we're talking about it. Yeah, I agree with what you said. Like it's a fine cover. I also think Power is another one of those songs where it's kind of like, just let Helloween handle this. Like it's almost like the sort of thing where
it's almost like a parody of itself at this point.
Yeah, it's like I want to hear it live, and I never want to hear it any other way. Like I don't want to. I save it for when I'm live and left side, right side. The whole bit. It's fine. It's just like certain songs, man. Like, the reason I'm such a big fan of the covers of The Chance and March of Time and Twilight of the Gods is because those are 3 of my favorite Helloween songs ever. And it didn't hurt that the bands did such a great job covering them. This is fine. I think had they chosen a deeper cut, I think it would have been cooler. Like, I don't know, like play the game is on, or like still we go, or something. If you're gonna pick something from the mid '90s Andy Darris era, I think even though this is probably one of the most popular or most well known of the Helloween songs from the '90s, it doesn't necessarily mean they needed to cover it. So it's fine. I don't think there's no bad covers on this album. It's just, I think some things are just kind of average and other things are really standout. And this falls more in the average area. And though I am interested to hear more from this band, however, after hearing that one other track.
And we get to the final track, which this band is so obscure that it makes Valdemar look like Iron Maiden, right? And that's what I'm going to say about Spain's Red Wine, who came out with 5 albums between 2001 and 2006, none of which I've heard a note of. But here on this particular compilation, they cover Rise and Fall by Helloween. And I have to say, they do a really good job. I think they do a phenomenal Rise and Fall album, and it's kind of an interesting way to end the album because it's like the singer has this really, really thick accent, but he does it in such a way for this goofy track that it's kind of like, I don't know, it kind of fits. And the keys are very prominent in spots, which again, I think lend itself to this particular song. It's surprisingly enjoyable, and I've never heard a note from these guys. What are your thoughts on Red Wine? And I'm not talking about the Chianti that you're probably going to have tonight.
I actually do have a bottle of red wine that I will be drinking tonight. I think it's a cab, though. This band came out of nowhere and went back to nowhere after the song was done. Really, really well done, fun, upbeat, punchy version of an upbeat and punchy song to begin with. Really good stuff. My understanding is that that covers are the only songs that this band has sung in English. Everything else is in Spanish. But I'm seeing now, and I had no idea, they have an entire album of covers called The End, which was their last album. They're another band that doesn't exist anymore. They cover Angra, Deep Purple, Rage, In Flames, Blind Guardian, Megadeth, Dio, Skid Row, and this Helloween song is on there as well. I kind of want to hear this album. Screw their original stuff. I want to hear them do In My Darkest Hour and Don't Talk to Strangers and Wings of Reality by Angra. Like this looks fascinating to me. But yeah, really good cover. Great way to end the album. And I remember, like, when I heard this, I was like, first of all, Red Wine is the least metal band name I've ever heard. Maybe not. Maybe they were big fans of Dio, because Dio loved his red wine. So, I mean, who knows? But I don't know. This was just such a fun way to end it. It's like they clearly don't speak a lick of English, and they just went in there and went for it, and they really did a hell of a job.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I'll say this about the whole experience this week. I'm so happy we went back and did this, and I'm sure that many of these bands are bands that we would not have otherwise talked about but for this episode. I don't like this album nearly as much as I used to. I'll be honest. I thought that it has some high spots. There's other bands that are like, I could take it or leave it. Not that there's bad stuff. It's just like, I don't know. I could take it or leave it. For me, scale of 1 to 10, I give it a 7. A good listen, enjoyable, but nothing extraordinary. Although some of the tracks that we did mention are definitely worth checking out.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think just based on the quality of Helloween songs, it kind of pushes it higher than maybe it would have been otherwise. So I'll give it a 7.5 just because, I mean, these are a lot of songs that I just enjoy listening to anyway. And just getting a chance to hear a bunch of different bands' takes on it. I think at some point we should talk about the first volume and kind of compare it and maybe see where our scores line up, just because there's so, like you said, there's like, this is such a like exercise in obscurity, whereas the first album is like all these like heavy hitting bands that we've covered in long form, like more than probably half the bands on that album. So it's like such a different it's so interesting how they went like a totally different way on this volume 2. But
And there are other Helloween tribute albums out there, so maybe it'll be the annual Halloween tradition. We can do another Halloween covers album next year.
It's not cover albums are tough because, or I should say, tribute albums are tough because, to get 12 or 13 bands to all do like a serviceable job, it's not an easy thing to do. And I think that they did a really solid job on both of these Keepers of Jericho. I mean, there's some tribute albums out there that I'm sure are pretty brutal to listen to, and these are definitely
that would be fun.
Yeah, well, that's true too. We can listen to, if anybody has any Abomination tribute albums that you want to suggest to us, we will take it under advisement.
Let's talk about some news, because there is just so much that happened. The good, the bad, and the terrible. I'll start with some of the bad. The keyboardist and singer for French power metal band Fairyland passed away this week at 44 years old. His name was Philippe Jourdana. This is a band that you and I have kind of joked about for different reasons offline, although ironically enough, their material is very good. And this just was a shocking announcement out of nowhere. So obviously our condolences to his family and friends and the rest of the guys in Fairyland. It was, surprising news to say the least. I know there had been some talk of them doing shows and whatnot, but it's just a tragedy. And in the same vein, we find out that Nightwish had some bad news as well with Floor Jansen getting diagnosed with breast cancer. Fortunately, it seems that they have removed her tumor. She's undergone surgery, and it seems like she'll be on tour as early as this spring, because they were just announced for 70,000 tons of metal. So, while I wish her obviously the best, and quite frankly, I hope she focuses on a speedy recovery, the good news is they've started announcing bands for 70,000 tons of metal, and they're the first ones. And I literally got a notification on my phone 30 seconds ago that they announced a second band. You want to take a guess? It begins with an I.
What's that?
It begins with the letter I.
Iron Maiden.
Yes, because that's not going to drive the price of that ship up. No, Insomnium. So for my money, they're nice. 2 for 2. So anyway, but yeah, my sincere prayers and thoughts to both the Nightwish and the Fairyland camp. But it sounds like Floor is set to do well, and obviously, recover from breast cancer. Thank God.
Yeah, thankfully she caught it early. I think she was just having like a routine mammogram, and just it was, that's why you do that. So when I first read it, it's like your brain goes to fear the worst right away, and then thankfully, like, it went on to say that she's expected to make a full recovery and be cancer free, and that's all we can hope for. And so yeah, best wishes. As far as Fairyland goes, like, they're just one of those bands that, like, I feel like there's like these gaps in between, and then they just come back and they have like a different singer, and like they release like a fun power metal album. But I feel like they've always just kind of lacked the consistency to kind of make a name for themselves. But it's never fun having to hear about somebody so close to us in age like pass away for whatever reason that it was. Sucks. And it feels like we're making these announcements more and more these days.
No question about that. And then with bands just taking hits on terms of members, Motley Crue's Mick Mars retiring from touring because of his health issues. Not a tremendous surprise there. Obviously, he's been doing it for decades and decades now. But obviously, wish him the best health. I saw him live, I don't know, 20 years ago at this point, and I just remember him on stage. I happened to be on his side of the stage, and quite the performer, especially back in the day. And another band who has really kind of grown in popularity. This one surprised me, but Rivers of Nihil has parted ways with their vocalist after I don't know, many years now, I guess. Jake Diffenbach, a founding member and a great singer in his own right, has left the band. And it's surprising to me just because this band has grown in popularity over the last few years. I thought that they were kind of destined for big things, kind of like a mini Opeth in many ways, just kind of getting bigger and bigger with each tour. But alas, their bass player will be taking over the vocal duties for the band.
I have nothing to add to that.
Very good. So that brings us to next week, which
Oh well, I might have a couple of headlines that might want to run by you.
Let's hear.
Well, I think you had mentioned Iron Maiden's Future Past tour is going to continue into 2024, so kind of just a little bit of a follow-up to our discussion earlier. I thought this was funny. Korn's Jonathan Davis says he is deathly allergic to dogs, and now I understand why they wrote a song called Freak on a Leash.
It's all making sense now. I had no idea. That's pretty funny.
Yeah. Like you'd mentioned, Nightwish announced for 70,000 tons of metal. It seemed like a lot of people were wondering if it was even going to happen because it's 3 months away. And are tickets even on sale yet?
No. And that's the crazy thing. I was set to go. And then I just resigned myself to the fact that it was going to be canceled. And now they've announced 2 bands, as I mentioned with Insomnium a couple of minutes ago. I'm shocked it's happening, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around the fact that I want to go on this thing, but it's like 3 months away. I need to get a flight, a hotel room. I need to rearrange my work calendar. It's going to be crazy, but I'm planning on going, so that should be fun. But it's just not the year that I had to usually plan to get this together. It's going to have to be a rush job. So it is what it is. But so far they're 2 for 2 with the lineup.
Yeah, definitely. David Ellefson has no time to get all butthurt about Megadeth, says he'll never own a copy of the new album.
No comment. Next.
What else do we have here? Let's see. David Ellefson, I do not own a copy of the new Megadeth. What have you heard the David Ellefson? Is it Ellefson and Soto did a album together? I'd heard that it was pretty good. Have you had a chance to hear it?
Yeah, it's good. It's not going to be on my album of the year list or anything, but I enjoyed it while I was listening to it. It was interesting because the bass, shockingly, was high up in the mix, so it really kind of drove the sound a little bit, but I thought it was well done. I thought some of the songs were pretty good. If you have 45 minutes or an hour, it's worth a listen. I don't know that it's something that you need to hear, though. Okay,
I'm not going to listen to it then.
There's other stuff you enjoy more.
Yeah. Former Journey vocalist, easy for me to say, Steve Perry is releasing his first ever holiday original called Maybe This Year, which is funny because many Journey fans are probably wondering, maybe this year Steve Perry will sing a song with Journey.
Yeah, that's funny. Listen, he's still got a tremendous following because he's got a very unique and just a wonderful voice. Not sure how Christmas is going to go this year, but we'll see.
Yeah, I guess I'll just finish up kind of to go full circle. Sharon Denadel from Within Temptation praised Iron Maiden and said they never fell out of love with music. And I know that she had said that it was such an unbelievable experience getting to go around the U.S. and open for Iron Maiden, and hopefully they got to play in front of more people than they did in New York. But I thought it was cool that Maiden asked Within Temptation to join them, and I thought it was, I hope that it was at least it opened some people's eyes to them that maybe didn't give them a chance in the past. Although based on our personal experience, there weren't enough people in the building to really make that much of a dent in their listenership. But all the same, it's always nice when the band that's opening is a band you enjoy, and so it doesn't feel like you're just tapping your foot waiting for the next band to come on. Which our very first metal club show that we went to, Helloween, we had to sit through. And to be fair, it's a band we'll never, ever forget the name of because it was so bad. And it was so... And people just wanted to see Helloween so badly that sitting through the band Click was not a blast. We had a lot of fun just ragging on them. So if you're listening, Click, we still hate you.
Yes, that no question about that. Memorable, but for all the wrong reasons. And you want to talk about coming full circle? That's what we're going to do right now. I mentioned Dr. Doctor earlier because obviously there's no Iron Maiden show without Dr. Doctor these days, or for many, many years now. Dr. Doctor first appeared in 1974 when UFO played the song on their Phenomenon album. Obviously, it's their composition. And UFO's Phenomenon is the album we are going to discuss next week. We're going to go back nearly 50 years to the British hard rock band. So I thought it was an interesting request. I've listened to the album quite a few times now. It's going to be an interesting discussion. They're a stalwart for that classic 70s hard rock sound. And they're still, we talked about Phil Moog and his health issues in an episode a couple of weeks ago. It's a shame. I would have actually gone to see UFO in concert. I feel like that would have been something fun, and it's a shame that their touring is kind of on hiatus right now. But at the very least, we'll be discussing their third studio album, Phenomenon, in just another week or so. Yeah,
this is going to be new for me. Other than Dr. Doctor, obviously, but this was a request from Patrick Celsus. So thank you, Patrick, for that. I've only got a chance to listen to it once so far. I'm going to listen to it a bunch more before we reconvene. But I spoke to our one-time guest, Andrew Gross, who joined us for the Blue Murder album, and I got to spend some time chatting with him before the Islanders game last Tuesday, and he was excited to hear that we were going to cover UFO, and he had nothing but good things to say. So I'm looking forward to that. As always, it's nice to listen to something new in spite of it being incredibly old.
Well said. Enjoy your week, bud. I look forward to reconvening next week, and we'll have some more stuff lined up. There's a lot of exciting stuff in the coming weeks and months, so look forward to announcing that soon, and enjoy your week, bud. I will talk to you soon.
All right, take care.